Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and for today's video, this is kind of like different from my usual content, but I feel like as someone who talks about entertainment, idols, dramas, celebrities in general here on my channel, this is also something that I've always wanted to touch on. I've worked on an article before talking about this topic, and I've also talked about this in a recent video that I did for Oshi no Ko, and that's the reason why I wanted to kind of like start this conversation here on my channel as well. I'm talking about parasocial relationships, or just the main idea of why we feel strongly attached to people or personalities that don't really know much of our existence. I'm talking about a celebrity fan, idol fan kind of relationship. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this as well is I'm currently filming this video on 23rd of April, which is 1 month until Kimpuri's 5th anniversary. If you've been watching my videos for a while, then you would know that I absolutely love them and that something's happening to the group and all that. I wouldn't dive much into it, but basically, like, it's something that's been weighing me down, and just the thought that we're just 1 month in to, you know, them reaching their 5th anniversary, but not really reaching their 5th anniversary in a way. It made me, you know, want to make this video, and that's the reason why we're talking about parasocial relationships today. I also saw an article the other day where it addressed, you know, the feelings of a fan when it came to what happened with Astro's moonbin. If you're not aware, so I'll be putting a link to that article in the description below as well. But it also discussed, you know, why we're so invested or why we're so affected when something happens to these celebrities or personalities that probably doesn't know of our existence. It's definitely a one-way type of relationship. But it's definitely something that affects us in a way that would affect, you know, anything that would happen to people that we actually know in our real lives. And I just want to like share my thoughts about this entire thing as well, because I know for a fact that even if it's such a common thing nowadays to be a fan of something, and it's not exactly new, or like, I think all of us, whenever we get into a hobby or anything like that, it's just that now being a fan of like idol groups or musical acts are put into this cage or niche or its own genre. But it's no different than watching all the films of this specific actor that you admire, or watching all the games of a specific basketball team or anything like that. Like, let's know, like, I remember being in a discussion with a coworker before about, you know, like not knowing whether or not they're in a fandom, and then explaining the definition of a fandom to them, saying that as long as you belong in something and you kind of inherently are into that specific thing and know things about it that goes beyond what's just on the surface level, to an extent you're part of that community. And if you like talking to people about that specific topic, then therefore that also makes you a part of that entire system. It's just that people who are very much into it in a more straightforward, outward manner, they're more caged into this idea of being a fangirl, a fanboy. But I think just generally having admiration or being invested in something other than, you know, like the usual things, that immediately connects you or creates a connection between you and that particular thing or person. And that in itself already establishes this kind of like relationship that you have with it, and anything that happens to it, no matter how much, like how shallow it is, like how you feel for it, it might not be as extreme as someone else who is more invested in it. If you feel anything remotely after hearing news or anything that has happened to the certain thing that you're interested in, that's already a relationship that you have to acknowledge with that particular topic or thing or person, so yeah. Now, I do know that there's definitely a lot of like nuances that also cover, the idea of parasocial relationships, all of these things. And there are extreme cases that follow this when it comes to obsession, when it comes to delusion, when it comes to this topic. But I want, instead of focusing on the negativity of that, which is often already highlighted by a lot of discussions surrounding this, focusing more on the rabid nature of being a fan of something, I want to focus on, again, the more affirmative side to it, and establishing like why these relationships matter to people, and why are we just so affected about this entire phenomena, of being invested, of loving something that is related to a certain creation of someone else, So the main idea of it is celebrities, idols, artists, all those things. Now, first and foremost, so again, as I mentioned, I did an article before about parasocial relationships, and so I ended up researching, what is it, and what does it exactly entail. So apparently the term parasocial relationships or parasocial interactions was coined in 1956, and it was during the resurgence of mainstream media, being because of televisions being incorporated into each and every household. The approach of media personalities in television at that time was to create this direct connection to the audience by talking straight up into the camera. Because of this, it developed this kind of relationship between the person on screen and the audience, as if you're directly addressing them as you're talking to a friend. And therefore, this kind of relationship evolved into something that is more relatable. For example, someone from TV said this, and therefore the believability or credibility of what that other person has said through the screen, something that you believe even if you don't really know them personally, because they are addressing you directly. It's evolved into this idea of artists, idols, celebrities doing this in a way by addressing audiences in a very friendly, familiar manner, and creating this collective acknowledgement that we may not be able to address each and every one of you, but this collective idea, message of what we're trying to send across is something that we want to sear through your heart and your humanity as an individual. The approach is collective, but the effect and the intent of it is meant to be absorbed by the individual. It's like a one-on-one thing that's just disseminated to just a lot of people. Imagine just sending a group text to everyone, but still you're sincere as to the messaging that you want to come across, so something like that. On paper, it definitely looks illogical. Why do we develop these attachments towards individuals or groups or personalities, or sometimes even 2D or 3D characters that know nothing of our own personal experiences and stuff like that? And I do think a major factor of this is because, just like any other form of creative media or art, or just anything that we read, we watch, or all these things, as soon as it gets absorbed by our senses, that experience also immediately becomes our own. So it's not exactly the artists anymore, but it's more of what we experience as individuals as we listen to this music, watch this kind of movie, or anything like that. It's, again, I do feel like it's human nature in a way that we like to associate things to certain things and say that these are the ones that evoke this certain feelings for us. But at the end of the day, it's also innately selfish, because the root of these emotions and feelings that we feel for these other things or people is still rooted from our very own experiences or how we interpret these things. Like, for example, I remember having this interview before talking about controversial artists and talking to someone who is a Potterhead. And obviously, with all the controversy surrounding, J.K. Rowling and stuff like that, what she mentioned was it's kind of like difficult to separate the two things. Like, she acknowledges what J.K. Rowling has done and said that are very, very controversial, harmful, all of these things. But at the same time, her experience with her work, Harry Potter, is something that couldn't be changed anymore because it transcended into something that is that person's own personal experience of the matter. She acknowledges that the creator of the work is controversial. She doesn't agree with the views of that. But the way that she absorbed the media that that person produced was inherently her own, and it's something that wouldn't change the way that she has a relationship with that particular media, aka the Harry Potter books. It's the same. I think the dilemma that usually comes with this when it comes to artists in a way is that people have a difficult way of separating the artist from the work. And I think with music, with film, it's a lot more difficult because you associate it with the personality that is singing the work, or as compared to, let's say, books where the text in itself, it's its own tangible thing. But yeah, so I digress. I think just overall, it's interesting in a way that, you kind of like absorb something as your own experience, and therefore it becomes completely your own. Thus, this relationship that you have with everything that is associated with it. When it comes to being a fan, for example, an artist produces music because it's their job to do so. Like, there's obviously this intent to create music that speaks to people, but the way that it would speak to someone, especially to you personally, might be different from how it is with another person. And that experience is uniquely your own. Your interpretation of that song, of that movie, is uniquely your own. And that's what makes things personal. It's just that you connect it to the artist or whoever it is that the work is related to. So I think that's the main reason why we're just so affected as to what happens with these people. It's because you always tend to go back to them whenever things are not constant in your current life. Like, they remain to be that constant figure. Music, lyrics, films, they don't change once they're out there. Unless, like, even reboots, even if you say it's a reboot, it's still a different variation of something that you have experienced firsthand for, like, whatever version that it is that you saw. It means different to you is this, and the interpretation of another person creating a similar variation of that same work is, again, you consider it as something different from what you experienced personally. And I think the correlation of that is we look at these figures, these people, and obviously, like, they are human, they are their own thing, but we often associated them with things that shouldn't change in a way, something that we go back to when things in our personal lives feel turbulent, feel like they're changing too much, they're fast-paced. We go back to these things because it provides a certain comfort of predictability in a way. Like, it gives you the sense of comfort that is something that's familiar to you, that you know, that you resonate with. It brings you back to your feelings at that particular time that you first listened to it or first watched it, and how it made you feel and why it became special. Changes in the personalities that are related to that particular work that's supposed to not change makes you realize that the realism of it all. Like, for example, you see it as something that's always there. The messaging of usually some songs or movies is that there's always this thing that you can go back to all the time. It's not gonna change. It's always there. It's something that you can always rely in. And then the reality hits of it that, like, this group is gonna change, or that this artist is not gonna make music anymore. And this kind of like routine changes for you, and that's a reason why you're just so affected of it. There's also, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what you feel for it is superficial. It's just human nature in a way that, people look at this relationship between, say, idols and their fans in a way that at the end of the day, it's just a job. And I've talked about this in my video about oshi. And yes, it is, but just because there's a layer of it that's a little bit ingenuine doesn't mean that the intent of it has to be disregarded as well and viewed as something malicious. I think in a way, people forget that, as with celebrities and idols and all these things, there's always still a veil of their private lives that we don't know about. And that's the same thing with us as fans. We reinterpret their works the same way as they reinterpret the job that was given to them so that they can attract audiences. And it's something that is often not addressed by fans. They often feel like if something about their favorite artists change, then therefore they're being betrayed. But then at the same time, it's also the same as fans reinterpreting this work as their own in a more selfish manner, because that's just how it is. Your experience is your own, and this person's way of delivering their job, the way that you interpret it, is also down to you at the end of the day. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but I think that's a reason why we're just so invested in these people who know nothing about us, is because the bottom line of it all is they evoke the certain feeling that we love to feel. It's still a very selfish sensation within ourselves, and it's within human nature to innately want to be happy, and so we are drawn by things that feel very stable and make us happy and feel very constant. And therefore, if something changes about that, then therefore we feel part of ourselves, part that we invested in these people and these things, to kind of like lose that. And just like with any other negative thing in life, we react negatively to that as well. It's more of like this instinct of, just when things, like the feelings of getting things working your way versus not. It's a very selfish thing that people often forget to address. They kind of like want to connect this kind of like relationship, and it also has to do with like gratefulness that correlates to that other person that made the experiences. Because again, as with anything, we are grateful for things that happen to us that work to our advantage. I think that's one thing that people often forget, is that human natures are inherently selfish, and we are drawn to things that make us feel good, that make us feel happy, especially during times when we feel our lowest. And that's the feelings that we associate with these artists, with these idols. It's not necessarily them per se, but they're an added factor to it. But it is inherently the experience that we've had based from the work that they've delivered, based from what we've read about them and what we felt after reading that. It's all inherently selfish. And I'm not saying that that's entirely a bad thing. I'm just saying that when this selfishness becomes malicious to the point that we start blaming them for things that are beyond their control as well, simply because we don't want to acknowledge the fact that everything we've experienced and felt so far is something that we've interpreted by ourselves, and it's something that is close to our own experiences, and we try to like blame them for it, for not doing things anymore that is to our favor. I think that's when it becomes twisted, because I think, like they're also doing this because it's a job. We're doing this because it makes us feel better. But, twisting things because of these reasons, and like forgetting that this personality thing made you feel good in the first place, that's when it gets very, very tricky and twisted when it comes to this. And again, there's a certain extent of this selfishness that you also have to like watch out and control and anything. But yeah, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, it's it's because of our own feelings. That's a reason, that's a bottom line of these things. There's just relationship of what they made you feel at that particular point in your life, but it's all down to you making that experience for yourself. They're an added factor as to why it got you to that point. And I think this association of things changing, it's more of the fear for our own selves and how things are gonna change. And obviously, like, we wish these people well sometimes, or we wish for their happiness or anything like that at the end. But there's also, like, people fail to acknowledge that part of it is because we also know that them getting their happiness will make us happy in a way, will also give us that selfish satisfaction that inevitably makes us happy, because that's just how things are. And I don't know why I'm making this video actually, but it's more of like just this thought that I'm also very, very, like, I've been in this cycle of just feeling sad and angry and all of these things. And it's because I love Kimpuri so much. And I know that whenever I'm feeling sad or tired or anything, I go back to their works and stuff like that. And I'm honestly scared as to what's going to happen after May 22, after Shojin and Kishi leaves the group. But there's also this acknowledgement that one of the main reasons as to why I feel this way is because I know how they make me feel right now as a group, complete as five. And I would lose that kind of feeling that I associate with them. And again, but they are their own people and they're doing this for them as well. And it's just kind of sad that some people fail to recognize that these feelings that you feel, these anger, this everything, usually it has to do more with yourself than it is with them, because it's your own feelings that you're trying to process in these types of situations. So with that said, I just want to make like this long talk through video, but that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me down in the comments below what are your thoughts on this. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much. And I'll be back to my usual content really soon. So, bye.